yeah, on the subject of Israel and U.S. weapon systems sent to Israel, I saw a figure just the other day that 70% actually of the weapons that Israel has been using and ammunition, bombs and so forth that Israel has used since October 7th has been supplied by the U.S. So they've only 30% of it is actually indigenously produced. 70% of it has come from the U.S. So again, that tells you again that if we wanted to end this conflict, we could. They are utterly dependent on us.
Right. Well, it just shows how complicit we are in everything that Israel is doing. I think
Right,
that's the big
absolutely.
thing.
Right.
So we just were talking about our military reputation being damaged, but I think the more important thing is that our moral standing has been damaged incredibly. I mean, you said again and again, and I agree with you that Israel's reputation has been irreparably damaged. That is now the most hated country in the world. But then us, by extension, we are also becoming maybe the second most hated country in the world because we are the one that are allowing this to happen, that are complicit in it, supplying 70% of the munitions that are helping to carry out the Gaza and genocide and all of these horrific bombings in Lebanon. For Israel, though, when its reputation has been irreparably damaged, I think it's more of an existential thing that has happened to Israel, that they can't come back for this, that they're a small country. They are completely reliant on their Western benefactors. And we're seeing their Western benefactors starting to give them the cold shoulder a little bit. In Europe, we're seeing signs of it. The U.S. is still holding strong, but civilian populations within the United States and countries that are the benefactors of Israel are also starting to wanting to distance themselves.
Starting to, yeah.
Right. So just the long-term trend, no matter really what happens in this conflict, it seems that Israel's days are numbered because of this fact that its reputation has been irreparably damaged. But it's not the same case for the United States. Its reputation has also probably, I would say, irreparably damaged. When the history books are written in the future, 10 years from now, when we look back on it, we won't be able to. Yeah, well, it'll become increasingly difficult to deny the genocide in Gaza once this is all over and we uncover everything. If the ICC and the ICJ go through and find the rulings of genocide, then at this point, the U.S. reputation is irreparably damaged, but it's not existential for us, right? So what is it? What do you see happening in the United States when this happens? Or do you agree with what I said just to begin with?
Well, yeah. Again, the U.S. being such a large country and with out there in the New World with between two oceans, can make a mess of all kinds of things, right? And then just return home and not suffer the consequences. I think that's going to remain true to some extent. I mean, but not entirely. I think already our reputation has been damaged by what's gone on in Ukraine and what's gone on in Israel so far. It's only going to be worse. Yeah, the question is, how far we go. Let's say it all ended now, I think we would be scarred. We would be damaged. We certainly don't have the, the control over much of the world that we once had. But as we pointed out, that actually doesn't really hurt us. But I think maybe as always, it's really a question of how the elite deals with this. I mean, if the average citizen, may go on and not really know that anything had happened, but our elites are very, passionately devoted to these different causes. Whether it is to the weakening of Russia or to the strengthening of Israel, these are for them. They're like existential struggles. They're not existential struggles for most of Americans. Again, Israel is something of an exception there that we've talked about earlier. The big question is really how do they deal with it? And it's hard to see them just like a turtle, just pulling its head into its shell and and saying, okay, well, I don't want to deal with this anymore. There's a real chance that there's going to be, that I think we're seeing, indications of already, that they will lash out. They will attempt to recover the hegemonic position that they once had. And I think that's what we're seeing. Part of it is it's been a very irrational response. Like, for example, to the reputational damage, it's the U.S.'s response hasn't been, okay, yeah, maybe we should actually start behaving differently, and demonstrate to the world that we actually are concerned, about human rights and so forth. Maybe we should stop supplying weapons to Israel, for example. But there's no sign that they're going to do that. Instead, they've gone on this all-out attack on RT and Sputnik, the Russian news agencies, and claim that they seem to believe, I think they really do, it's like the reason that the most of the world is turning against us is not because of our idiotic, actually evil policies, but because of, Russians telling lies about us. And if we can shut that down, we'll be okay. Now, that's just an absurd response, but that's a response that we've seen, and I think we'll just see more of the same. I think, there's going to be a lot of lashing out and flailing, and, who knows where it's all going to lead. It's kind of, sometimes it's comical, but, there could be real dangerous repercussions, especially if it involves military action.
Well, the more that the United States has been lashing out, in my opinion, it seems like the weaker and more childish and immoral we become, and the world sees us that
certainly.
way.
No, I think that's right. I mean, that's it's a problem, I think, within the West in general. It's just that the West exists within a bubble. So they when they talk about the international community, I think they really believe it. But their so-called international community, of course, is just the collective West, and they talk to each other, but they just don't listen to what the rest of the world says. If things don't, if they hear something that doesn't really is not consistent with the things that they believe, they hear something from outside the bubble, they just reject it out of hand, or they call it Russian talking points. They've become, kind of a very closed, inward-looking society, and which is, again, it's a very bizarre phenomenon. But it's, I've been observing this for years and years, and it's just becoming more and more obvious and intense as the years go by.
Right. So this lashing out, and it seems to just be hastening the demise of the empire. So the more we lash, and it doesn't seem like we're able to do, we're not even doing that much damage with our lashing out. I mean, of course, there's been horrific, damage in Ukraine and what we've seen in Gaza. But I mean, in terms of it breaking out into just a full-out war, I don't see the U.S.'s ability to conscript troops and put people on the ground. I hope that we will run out of gas soon. Do you think that's possible? That, how much flailing can we do? We've been flailing, and the flailing overall, to me, has been kind of pathetic. And so will the flailing, will we start getting, lobbing bigger bombs and get out of control?
Well, I mean, there's always
weaker and weaker,
Right. Who knows? I guess I'll repeat what I said, I think, in our last episode. It's just that it's really impossible to predict the actions of an irrational actor. When you're talking about, maybe a government that is cruel, brutal, but clearly logical and self-interested. And I think you can say that about quite a few governments in the world. It's rather easy to predict how they'll behave, because they'll behave in a self-interested way. They'll do the rational thing, the thing that's in their own interest. But the U.S., the collective West, is becoming increasingly irrational, and so I can't predict how they're going to respond to a continued decline in their prestige and power. It's just going to be irrational. That's all I can say, really.